All right, welcome to the September 22nd, 2020 Club Cubase Google Hangout. I'm going to do a quick audio test and we'll get started in just a moment. Bear with me. Just going to check my audio feed here. All right, welcome to the September 22nd. All right, that sounds like it's going through fine. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the Hangout today. If you haven't, I'm based in the United States. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a Steinberg product specialist. I'm based outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. I will be the host for the event today. And if you haven't been on a Club Cubase Google Hangout before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de or ask your questions in the chat field. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can today. We'll usually go about 4 hours. And after that, we lose all of our free closed captioning. So we'll try to get through as many questions as possible during the Hangout in chronological order. The questions will come in faster than my ability to answer them in a complete and succinct manner. So if you ask a question, it may be 20 to 30 minutes by the time we get to it, but we will try to get to it. So there's no need to go through and leave the question repeatedly. That only kind of slows things down. And also sometimes the question could depend on, I have, which version of Cubase you're running and what level. So you can say I'm running Cubase Pro 10.5 or I'm running Cubase Elements 8. Cubase Artist 9, that information is sometimes helpful. If you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself. If you're watching the replay of it, you may want to skip ahead till about 10 minutes as we let people get logged in. And we will try to have the index done for all the topics covered with timestamps done later tonight for the Hangout or early tomorrow morning. So that way you could jump to very specific questions that were asked during the Hangout. So let's go ahead and take a look and see who is on the Hangout so far. Okay. So seeing a lot of familiar faces. Okay. So we see Jan from Stockholm, Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Ace from Texas. All right. Okay, so all right, so we have Matt from Fort Wayne, Indiana, Millard Brown from Texas. Okay, so we have John Costigan from Kenosha. All right, so we have Real Raven 2000. I think they used to be on the Hangouts a lot earlier. So we have Kerwin Young. It's great to see you again. All right, so we have Columbia, Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Thanks for giving me the heads up that I put the wrong date in, Taylor. Appreciate that. I was able to get that updated. Okay. Okay, so we have Austria. All right, so we have John checking in from New Jersey. All right, so Real Raven 2000 from Ireland. All right, so we have Germany. We have India, Israel. All right, so we have Chico, California. All right, so we have Michigan. All right, so India, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Greece, Amsterdam. All right, so we have South India. All right, so we'll let some more people getting logged in. All right, so we have Sweden. right, I'm just going to check my audio interface here. Make sure it's set for the correct output so you guys can hear it as well. That'd be helpful when we start the audio part. Okay, we'll get started in just a few more minutes. Let some more people get logged in. And again, if you want to ask your questions in the chat field, we will just kind of go through and do that. All right, so we have Egypt, Netherlands. All right, if you're on the Hangout, please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself. And if you're attending it live. All right, just seeing a comment from Link. Cubase is the best DAW I've ever used, so glad I picked it up. All right, so we have Denmark. We have Tunisia. That's great. So not sure if we have anyone from Australia, but I think we usually have a couple of people. All right, so we have South Africa. All right, so we have 3 continents so far, or 4. All right, so we see Pauly D. Saying it's 100 degrees in Arizona. All right, so we have Finland. At first I thought it said Finland in. I thought it was maybe Finland, Indiana. That's our kind of... So I just see a question. Can you translate a book translation to explain this program? So I'm not sure if it's translation of the... So if it's the documentation, you might be able to with, but the Hangout, I'm not sure if it's going to be translated, but I think it'll show up in the closed captioning. All right, so we have Vietnam, India. Okay, so we have Multitask Family TV from USA. Okay, we'll wait just a couple more minutes. Maybe another 30 seconds and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so we have Anthony in Detroit. All right, some more people are getting logged in. All right, so we have Portugal. Lucas checking in. Good to see you. I think you've been on the Hangouts before. Is there anyone this is their first Hangout? Just let us know as well. Okay, wait just another couple seconds and we'll get started. Thanks. I appreciate everyone's patience, letting people get logged in. Okay, so we have Juan from Spain. Probably will pronounce this wrong, maybe Egil or Egil from Norway. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So let me scroll back up. Okay, so just see, first question, while we're waiting, how do I solve a no sound problem? Studio setup, an audio connection, I can't select the sound card. It doesn't allow me. So make sure if you could maybe perhaps indicate what sound card you're running, but the sound card will be accessed from your studio setup. And we'll go over here to VST audio system. And at this point, you should be able to see any installed driver that you have for your audio interface. So if you're using a built-in sound card on Windows, it may say generic low latency driver. And then you may have to go into the control panel for the audio interface. And, depending on the audio interface, there you could set if it's using like an HDMI or if it's using, the speaker output. But you should be able to see, once you click here, any audio driver that's installed. So if you have a dedicated ASIO driver, that's best than kind of a generic Windows driver. On a Mac, you have kind of its equivalent is built-in audio that uses kind of the built-in audio of the Mac itself, but you should be able to kind of select it there. And there's a little setting here once you select the VST audio system of maybe releasing driver when application is in the background. And you may have to do this if you're on a Windows system, in a Windows driver too. So if you open up a program that's accessing the audio, it may kind of hold it captive and not release the audio interface to other programs. Okay, so we have a question from Ace. Hi, Greg. Hope you and your family are doing well. We are. Thank you for asking. What are the settings in VariAudio to convert a monophonic audio violin wave file to MIDI so I can assign to a Halion 6 instrument? So all we had to do to convert like a violin part, and I don't think I have an actual violin part, but we could do it kind of with voice, is we can go to within VariAudio here. Let's have it do its pitch detection. And then under functions, you'll see here, extract MIDI. And what that will do is we could retain kind of the notes and pitch bend data, which is probably what you want to do. And you could also use kind of the VST3 note expression and VST3 tuning curve, which will be more accurate. And so if you wanted to do that, and then you could retain the dynamic velocities, but you could put it onto, have it create a new MIDI track, hit OK, and then as we go to the bottom here, this would be the MIDI part that's been extracted directly from the VariAudio editor. Okay. Hello, Greg. Is there an easy way to number multiple tracks at once for exporting stems? So let's say if I was exporting stems. So let's say if I come here, and I'll just undo the last function. I will go to export audio mixdown. So within the export audio mixdown here, there's actually going to be, if you click directly in the little settings cogwheel in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that you could have different naming schemes. And one of these naming schemes that you'll have is counter. So if you wanted to automatically add different numbers for different takes, you could start it, you have a 4-digit counter. If you want the counter, to start at number 1. So I would just go again to the export audio mixdown. So while you're making stems, and just make sure you may see the counter as being not selected, but you could just kind of drag it directly into one of the attributes. And then as you export your audio files, it'll have the name, the counter, you could have the project name, the date, so different functions that you could have directly there. So you could see kind of what it's going to look like. You could say, okay, the name, we could also say the channel number. So say if we drag the channel number over, you could have for each of these where, you'll have the channel number, the project, or the name of the track. So you can say channel name, so that as we do that, you could have different functions and attributes that are available within naming schemes. So let me know if that kind of works for you. I think that should do the trick. Okay, Okay, so I see a question from Taylor from Pine Grove. Transport settings in 10.5 seem to be specific to each project. Is there a way other than making a template to make those settings global? So let's say if I start off I'll do a new project. And let's say I'll just call this small transport. Okay, so I will come over here. Let's just save this. And let's see if I go back to my project here. So it looks like those are going to be kind of saved per project. So if we come to, let's see if there's a way of setting the attributes here to save this as a preset. So if you have everything kind of set up here, it looks like if you go to the settings cogwheel and click on setup, that there's presets that you could store. So at this point, it looks like you could just save different presets of what functions are active. So I would try that. So again, just kind of go directly to the settings cogwheel to the very lower right-hand corner of the very right edge of the transport. And you could probably save that. And then if you I think if you leave it, unless you change it, that those settings will be applied into your next project. So if I do a new empty project, those settings. So let me just come over here. And you could also just kind of right click. So, but it looks like maybe a template might be the best way. And I can see why it could make sense to have everything kind of stored directly as, on a project by project basis. So if you wanted to start, you could do that directly with a template and just kind of start off that way. Okay, so we have a question. I have problems with scrubbing video in Cubase. I have to export low resolution video to make it smooth. Do you have any tips? It could be depending upon like which codec the video was coming in on, could have a big effect on this, but let's go ahead and give it a quick try. So I will just open up a project that has some video. Just activate this project. All right, so I'm just going to hit F8 to open up my video. So just kind of placing my cursor on the video window itself will allow you to kind of, navigate directly in the video. So I'm not sure if you're like scrubbing directly from the video itself here. But just kind of when you just go directly on the video, I think you could go like 30 frames, forward or backward. So let me just take a look at the time code here. So if I go to the middle, so it looks like about 37 frames, or this could be, it's about, I think 30 frames that you, like 1 second that you could navigate directly here. So that looks pretty smooth. So I'm not sure if that's how you're scrubbing the video, but it could also, you may want to try a video that was done with a different codec. But as we just kind of look here and I just click on the video window itself, that seems pretty smooth directly in the video playback there. So that allows you to navigate, within your video. And that seems, and this is just kind of taken down from YouTube, just the Steinberg office. So that seems pretty, that doesn't seem jerky or unsmooth. It kind of seems very responsive to me. So I would, if you're not scrubbing that way, you could just try that within the video. Okay, question. I have a question on the lower zone. I can't get triplet grid to show there, only on the main arrangement window, mashed it. So I've kind of brought this up before to some of the people, but when you go to, let's say, like an audio editor, let's say if I have a loop and we wanted to see the timeline for doing perhaps like audio warping, so I will come here. So when we want to see the grid, this grid is still, even if everything is set in triplets, the grid in the sample editor at this point still just does when doing, let's say our audio warp and we want to do free warp, that this is still kind of tied to 8th notes and 16th notes, and it really isn't a way within the sample editor for the grid to have triplets, but I will pass that on again. Okay. All right, so just kind of move on. Thanks for great questions. And I see just follow up from the grid that it makes it hard to warp triplets. I agree. So. Okay, just reading through different comments. We still have a lot of introductions going on. Okay, hi Greg, David here from South India. I find it hard quantizing audio files. If I try musical mode, the tempo changes. How to quantize just like we do with the MIDI files. So let's say if I wanted to, I'll just jump to a project here quickly. So you don't have to place it in musical mode. We could think of musical mode as being more for dealing with whether the audio files that are recorded at different tempos will, speed up and slow down to playback in the correct tempo. It doesn't necessarily involve working more with, quantizing your audio. So, musical mode, probably won't really make a difference there. So say if I double click and I wanted to see my audio here, so I could just take this particular area and let's go to, let's say, our Quantize panel, and we could just put this into like audio warp and say, okay, I just want this to be, 16th notes or 8th notes. And then, we just come here and hit Q, and you could see that would just shift those particular notes, very similar to what we do with MIDI. So make sure you don't have like IQ mode. I don't think that will help you with that. So let's just try and say, okay, I'll undo that, but I'll just take this off and I'll just have audio warp checked and then hit the letter Q, and you can see that the transients will automatically just kind of move directly with the beats. So as we come here, we'll just undo that edit. So let's say if I wanted this to be, quarter notes, and depending upon the part, will be a little different than MIDI, but it will just kind of align the different parts up like so. So try the audio warp quantize and make sure that you have this turned off and just do it from the quantize panel. But you probably don't want to, you probably don't have to put it into musical mode for that, but it'll just kind of audio warp it internally within the part. Okay, so you see a question, Greg, sometimes when starting up a session, Cubase reset preference setup and start by default. How can I solve that? So when you see like the dialog box comes up saying, that, do you want to delete your preferences or disable preferences or start with the current ones? That indicates that something crashed Cubase the time before, or maybe you shut the computer down without closing Cubase. So what Cubase is trying to allow you to do is to start up the program, and if there was a plugin that was crashing the system repeatedly and you couldn't open up a project, or it was a preference that had gotten corrupted, at that point, you could choose to start without third-party plugins, and sometimes it'll give you, if you look at the very top, it may give you an indication that this plugin caused an issue, so it's kind of giving you a heads up that maybe a plugin is causing your Cubase to crash. So you could choose to disable that, and that could allow you to run it into a diagnostic mode. So that's really kind of the concept of that, is it's indicating that something terminated, unexpectedly, and Cubase is trying to allow you to see what it was, what function it was, and to disable it if you want to. Okay. Okay, just reading through, still going through some of the introductions. Okay, so I just see comment. Sorry, my chat field jumped on me. So the comment is, it is my first time here catching the live Cubase Google Hangout. I just love your content, Greg. Keep up the great work. Thanks for the kind words. I hope it's been helpful. So, and welcome to the Hangout. We hope to see you on more of the live Hangouts in the future. Okay, so just see a question from Ace. Hi, Greg. Purchased Vintage Classics VSTs or VST's instruments a couple years ago. Recently, I have a new computer, need to re-download, but it's missing in the download section at Steinberg. What is the solution? So if you could let me know exactly, Ace, which plugins were in the Vintage Classics VST instruments. So I think there were some Vintage Classics for the iOS, for Cubase, but if you could just maybe refresh my memory, and we could probably find a download link for you. And if you want to email me offline, you could do that at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we have Skinny Lane Sounds. Hey, first hangout from UK. Welcome to the Hangout, and just feel free to ask any question that you have. Okay, so I see greetings, Greg from North Carolina. Whenever I stop the transport and start it with spacebar, the project cursor skips to bar 13. What could be the cause? I don't have any MIDI keyboard connected. So let's see. So if I come here, and so as you just hit play, it's jumping to bar 13. So I would check to see, it could be a preference. So there is a preference under transport that when you come here for the return to start position on stop, so I think, so right here, there's this preference for return to start position on stop. So if we started playing at measure 13, and I just kind of play my project with me, and if that preference is checked when I hit spacebar, it goes back. Let me just check the status of the preference again here. So is just a return to start position on stop. So, it could be that, I would check maybe the status of that. So if I come here, that could be it. So I would check there and see if that toggling that preference again under transport, return to start position on stop. If you toggle that, if that changes the behavior. If not, you could just let me know. All right. So we see Rebor Emb. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. This is my first hangout. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Okay, so we have Eric checking in from OKC. I believe it's Oklahoma City. Great to see you on a hangout. I haven't been there in a long time. Okay, question for later. How do you display a triplet grid in lower zone? So, okay, we've covered that already. Okay, hi Greg. Can't stay due to work. We'll listen later. One question. If I upgrade to Nuendo, does that have everything I'm used to in Cubase plus other features, or do you have to give up anything features-wise? I think it has currently, they're at kind of feature and generation parity, so it'll be the same. I think maybe Nuendo doesn't have VST Transit, which is kind of like a cloud collaboration tool. It's not the most widely used features, but I would say that currently, it's exactly as you described. So Nuendo has everything that Cubase has, plus more like ADR, Dolby Atmos. It has some additional plugins like the randomizer. It's going to have Game Audio Connect, so network collaboration in kind of a different way. So, okay. All right, so we see Themba Kumalo, my first hangout. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Hope you learned a couple tips or tricks. Okay, so I see a question, how to delete the curvature point in direct offline processing for making envelopes. So I'm not sure if this is with volume or pitch, but we'll go ahead and take a quick look. So let's say if I want to come here, and I'll just do a quick direct offline processing. So let's say if I just wanted to do maybe a fade out. So let's say if I have my fade out like this, you may want to go and just change kind of the curve type. So if you wanted to come here, so some of these different curves and you could also just have, here you could have kind of different parabolic patterns. And if you click here, you can see just kind of the straight line. So let's say, so if you wanted this to be very straight, you could again just kind of start and go directly like this. So depending how you adjust kind of the curves, you could have kind of, with a straight and have some different results. So if I wanted this to be, without kind of the curves, but just to be kind of straight linear, without any Bezier type curves, you could just double click and put in points as you see fit right here. So you could go to this mode and click this mode, and then you could put in kind of straight line. So if it's a different envelope, let me know, and we could see if we could get it sorted out for you. Okay, but let's see if it's a deleting the curvature point. So let me just see if I got this. So I'll just go to my process again. So if we have a curvature point here and I wanted to delete that, just see if there's like a modifier key. So I'm not seeing a modifier key to delete or restore it to where it was. So you might just have to kind of click here and reset it. Let me just try all my combinations of modifier keys. Yeah, so I don't see like a double click or to remove the point there. Sorry about that. All right, so we see from Jan, the pool, Control P. What do you think most users forget about using the pool? I think as admit, I use the pool probably too little. So, we can think of the pool as being, where a lot of your files, for the particular project live. So when you go to the pool window, here we could see all of the audio files that are kind of being used in a particular project. Now, some of the things that are helpful that you could do in a pool is you could take all of the files in your project and put them into musical mode. You could change what the tempo stamp is, what the time signature is. You could also switch between different time stretching and pitch shifting algorithms. But where it gets really handy is, let's say you just kind of drag files in from different folders and you wanted everything to be in one consolidated folder. If you right click, here we could actually choose Prepare Archive, and that will move all the folders into the central pool folder. Now, some people also will come over here and organize their files in the pool. So say if I have all these vocal files here, I could just choose to create a folder. And I could take all of the vocal files just for organizing and put those into the folder that we created. So there I could have all guitar parts, and everything just kind of organized directly in a pool. It's also helpful to know how many times a particular audio file has been used in a particular project. So those are a couple of things that you could do with pools. Now, something that's interesting that a lot of people don't realize is sometimes we have clients, if they're working in advertising or they're working in where they need to have the same type of sounds. Maybe they're doing a radio show and they need like little tag sounds or different corporate like audio identity type stuff. Is you could take your pool here and we could export it or we could save it as a library file. And then we could choose to open up the library. So if I wanted to come here, we could say export a pool and have this as a library file. So if I've done like even sound design for a movie where this movie has very specific sounds that we use that are unique and only to be used in this particular project, we could And let's say we're now scoring the sequel and we wanted to have access to those particular sounds that were used in the first film. I could open up the pool from another project as a library and still be able to have all of those files accessible, even if they don't reside in the current project folder. So a pool, which is a reference of different audio files or a collection of audio files, can be stored independently of the project. But by default, the pool actually is just kind of organizing all of your, files being used in a particular project. It was actually done by one of our former developers who passed away much too young, a guy named Mark Badger. And it really, and I think this is probably done in 1992, and it really hasn't changed much because he kind of got the whole concept pretty right with the pool. So those are some things you could do with the pool. All right. All right, so I see question in mixer view volume slider for built-in metronome. So there's a couple of ways to do this depending on your version. So if you go to your control room, you could see kind of, your dedicated volume. You could turn the metronome on and off there. Excuse me. If you have a part selected, so let's say if I come here and hit P, and you could go to the project and you'll see signature track. And one of the great things is you could also choose just to render audio click between locators. So I have my left and right locator set for my song. I'll just click there, and now that will automatically just render an audio file of my click track. And this will be on its own fader, so you could come directly to, it's just as a normal audio file. So as your click track is playing, you could make it louder or softer. So those are a couple things you could do with the click track very quickly to have kind of an independent volume within the folder. And if you don't have, I think that came in 9.5. And if you don't have that, we could go directly to your metronome setup, and you could go to your click sounds and you could set kind of the volume or velocity level directly here. There's different presets as well, but you could come over here and adjust the velocity to make each of the clicks a bit louder, and you could also increase the level, and this came in 9.5. So those are a couple of suggestions you could do to make the click louder or change the volume of it. Okay, so we had this question, and this was mailed in as well. How to make a key command or logical editor process, or any way to open a specific track preset with a key combination. So I don't know if I don't know of a way to open up a specific track preset. But if you want to, open specific track presets, if you come directly here, so let's say, you could choose to load track preset, and once you're here, you could just kind of type in, or you could search by how many stars a particular track preset. But I don't know of a way, and I don't know of a way with a macro to say, open up this particular track preset. But you could, do the load track preset and type the name if you wanted to. So say, okay, I just want to come here, and I could, search out track presets, that way. But I don't know of a way to automatically, open a specific track preset with a logical editor or like a key command or macro. All right. Perhaps this is a question. Perhaps this is subject for a full video, but it would be great to have a tutorial about how to make our own impulse response files for use in Reverence. So, you know, they're really standard WAV files, and there's different techniques that people use. I've seen some people will go in and, you know, what you want to do is to actually just send like an impulse directly in, and to see what an impulse sounds like if you wanted to kind of make your own. So people can send an impulse and then record what the ambience is of a particular environment. So if we go to add an effects channel track, I will come here and we'll choose Reverence. All right, and let's say, I'll just turn this up so we could hear it a little more. So if we wanted to audition kind of what the sound is, and let me just see if I have this. Okay, so, you know, we could hear kind of what that particular impulse is. So let's say I want to go to a large live stage. I could come here and I'll just make this, turn that up a little bit. So now what you could do is take this particular impulse sound. So, and let's say we want the output, we want the mix to be at 0%. So, and let's say our output, and take this either through, you know, speakers. And when you do this, that sends like an impulse signal. So you could take this sound, feed that out of speakers into the room that you want. And what that's going to do is record that sound coming out of your speakers into the room. So it sounds something like, you know, it's just kind of an extreme example, but let's say you're in, you know, English chapel. So you take your speakers, you know, you may have to turn them up loud. It could be PA speakers, but you want to just send the impulse and then record that sound as like a WAV file. And then all you have to do is choose to import that WAV file directly into Cubase. Some people, I've seen people pop balloons. I've seen people just, you know, do a quick hand clap. You know, I have a friend who's like, you know, like has really worked, you know, very effectively to get great sounding, you know, how to clap his hands to get impulse responses that work really well. And it'll just kind of take out the initial attack of the hand clap and capture the room after. So those are some different techniques that you could use if you wanted to make your own impulse responses. Okay, reading through more comments. So we have a question. Sometimes the PC or Mac doesn't see the sound card. If the computer doesn't see it, Cubase won't see it either. I've had to restart the Mac after putting it to sleep. So I guess this is with our audio interface question from earlier. So it's a great point, Jeff. Thanks for sharing, and absolutely correct. So you see, Greg, 32-bit float or 64-bit float. I assume that this is with the processing precision function. So if we come over here to your studio setup, you could have processing precision. So with version 10, I believe they added the capability of 64-bit floating point precision. So it's double precision. So it can make a difference. You may not hear it on every single project or every single genre. So if you're doing like, you know, a really, you know, like a heavy metal thing with lots of distorted guitars, or maybe an EDM thing, it may not make a huge difference. It may not be as noticeable. But what this is going to allow you to do is why we have, a lot of people record at 24-bit. And if we wanted to maintain the 24-bit audios, the full resolution of that, and add processing onto it, that's when we go into 32-bit floating point. Now, we could record 32-bit integer audio with our URC interfaces, as well as our AXR4 and T and AXR4U audio interfaces. Those have 32-bit integer converters. So if we wanted to maintain the 32-bit integer word and do additional processing for mixing and adding effects and EQs and reverbs, we would, instead of being able to truncate the original signal to accommodate the new mix information and that additional DSP, you have the 64-bit floating point. When it first came out, I actually sent, I have a dear friend of mine, Greg Lukens, who lives in the Washington, D.C. area, who many people in pro audio circles know is he probably has some of the best ears in the entire recording industry. And he's actually, he did live sound for a number of years and would just get called in to fix problems where no one else could get a solution for. And he did live sound for Rush for 10 years, like from 75 to 84 or 85 roughly. So, and he's a blind mastering engineer as well. So when I first wanted to see if it made a difference, I took the same exact project and mixed it at 32-bit and exported it as a 32-bit and exported it as a 64-bit floating file. And I sent it to him. In Greg's room, he has Meyer X10s, and I think they're about $85,000 each in his mastering room. So it's a pretty critical listening environment. So when I want to listen to something very critically, I just go over to Greg's house and play it on his system. And he immediately, I said, which one is better? I sent him 2 files, just, labeled, C and D. And I was like, I'm going to send you 2 files. Let me know what you think. And he's like, this file, he called me up and within 5 minutes, he's like, this file, it's very close, but this one sounds better. And he immediately picked the 64-bit floating point. So that's why we have that. But, now that Cubase is capturing 32-bit integer, we have the capability of processing and maintaining the original sonic integrity of the 32-bit integer and having the effects, which is why we see the 64-bit. So it's just a question. Would you know any default ways in Cubase to make a bass pulse ARP like what was used in The Dark Knight Rises? So I don't, I don't know that example. I've seen the film a number of times and kind of, obviously I'm a huge Hans Zimmer fan and, I've gotten to work with him several times over the years, which is always an incredible joy. But a lot of it could be kind of set to LFO. So let's say if I want it, or just using kind of different arpeggiators. So I'll show you a couple ideas that may, spark some creative energy for you. So let's say I will add an instrument track but I could be totally out of context with this. So let's say. So like when you kind of get into stuff like that, you have built-in arpeggiators in a lot of the Steinberg instruments. So if you wanted to, activate, different arpeggios, and if you wanted this to be, different rhythmic values. And say you want to take a couple out. And this is probably just a monophonic patch. So if I jump back here and let's say I play a chord, so you could do some stuff like that, and I'm probably just doing something completely wrong. So I'm just holding down 3 notes or 4 notes. So just holding kind of one note down and so if you wanted to, you know, have different parameters, you could come over here and, you know, have different filters and stuff like that could kind of follow. So you could do some stuff like that. There's also, when you go into like your MIDI inserts, there's going to be built-in arpeggios here as well. So if you wanted to, you know, just have simple arpeggios, and this is probably very simplistic compared to what hands would do, but you could come over here. Couple that with your cutoff. So maybe something like that can get you kind of started in what you're looking for. But I'll go ahead and try to listen to The Dark Knight Rises, and I'll listen to it maybe on Amazon Music tonight, and I could probably get it something closer. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, so we have Benny Soderberg on his first Hangout. Thanks for joining us. So I see a question: what's the highest sample rate and bit depth Cubase can handle? So Cubase can do 32. We could do 64-bit floating point recording at 192 kilohertz. We could do 32-bit integer at 192K. If you needed to go up beyond that, we could have our AXR4T and 4U can do 384K and 32-bit integer for those interfaces. So Nuendo can do up to 384K. Cubase tops out at 192K, and both can handle 32-bit integer or 64-bit floating point. Okay, so question: high DPI, edit preference, general, when shall I use high DPI? So what high DPI is going to allow you to do is to actually have, you know, beyond, like right now I'm running a 1080p resolution, what I'm saying, but if I wanted to run like a 4K or 8K resolution where we see 4 times the screen real estate, and often when you see like a 4K screen, it doesn't necessarily translate to being 4 times larger or 4 times more workspace than what I currently have. but you could have 4 times the pixels in the same amount. So if you have a 4K or 2K or 8K monitor, the high DPI is going to allow you to have the high resolution kind of beyond like 1080p. So that's when you'd want to use it. All right, so it's just seeing Millard Brown indicating that people should mash the like button. So I won't disagree. So if you've learned a new tip or a new trick, please feel free to hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. And that way you can be notified of future events and hangouts. Okay, question. When I change the tempo in track, audio files get out of sync. What is the correct way to use musical mode? Should I go to the audio pool and change the tempos there, or what's the best way? So let's start a new project. And I'll just drag a couple of loops over. So let's say we'll start with drums. Okay, so I'm just going to drag this over and let's say I'm going to start it on measure 1. So we see that, and a lot of times you may notice that the name of the file may have a tempo indication. So if I play this, and we see this when we see this little icon in the upper right-hand corner, that this will automatically follow whatever tempo you have. So as I slow down tempos here, so I'll go from 100 to 92 beats per minute, the drum loop is automatically gonna just follow those particular times. Now, if I select these files and from the info line, tell it to not be in musical mode, it's going to play back kind of the original tempo. And let's say my metronome, I want it to be 108. And again, when I do 108, we have our metronome. This audio is going to play back and not change its speed based on the tempo. So once I put these in musical mode, like so, I can now have these events automatically follow and be kind of like a tempo parasite. So 120, 144. So that's kind of what musical mode is going to allow you to do. So if you So if you wanted to be compliant to the tempo track or the tempo settings in Cubase, that's when you would put it into musical mode. But you want to have an accurate tempo for it to base to base the timing on. So if you have an audio file here, and as you record an audio file, it's going to look at your tempo that you have in a project and do a tempo stamp there. Sometimes people don't record to a click track, like if they're recording live musicians, and they may have the tempo at 120 beats a minute, and they don't turn on the tempo here, so the metronome's never on. And you may have a tempo setting of 120 beats a minute, but the audio file is not 120 beats a minute. And if you run into that, you could come over here, go to your project menu, and you want to do a tempo detection of the audio file. So you could do an automatic tempo detection. And then from the audio file itself, select the audio menu and go to advanced and say set definition from tempo. So if there's tempo changes that are going on in the original file, and it's not 100 beats a minute, it's not 120, it's changing and fluctuating. At that point, once you do the audio to advanced to set tempo or set definition from tempo. Once we have that set, at that point, we could, have that metadata of all the tempo changes embedded into the file, and whatever tempo changes it has at that moment, it'll be kind of accurately handled for tempo changes. Okay, so I see when importing video, whenever you change tempo, the video shrinks or grows in adjustment. Is there a way to lock the video from resizing? So let me just remove this track. Okay, so let's go ahead and import a video file. Okay, so I'll just kind of come here. I think I have a video file in this folder. Okay, so I have my video file here. I'm going to just get the correct frame rate. All right, so the video isn't going to actually change time. So if I change my tempo here, while the video is, it looks like it's getting smaller, what it's actually doing is, let's look at it in a different way. So I'll come here and let's add a ruler track. And you'll notice that the time for the ruler track, even as we adjust our tempo, the ruler track is going to be constant as we do this. So we're going to have, as our tempo speeds up and slows down, the video is playing back at the same tempo, just the time, the measures here are changing. But you notice that the relation of the video to the video track is not going to change. So once we come here, let's say I wanted to just put if you put a marker there at that point, as we change, the time is the same. So the video isn't getting smaller, just the timeline is just decreasing. So the video is going to play back at the same speed. So if we just play back from the beginning, and I'll just open up my video playback. So we'll just kind of start there. So now if I double my tempo, let's say 202 beats a minute, you notice that the video is not going to change speed, but the measures So again, we just kind of rewind here. Let's jump back to 50 beats a minute. The video is going to play back at the same rate. Regardless of what the tempo is. So the measures are adjusting to accommodate, but we'll notice that the time isn't going to change. The actual time isn't going to change. So I don't think you have anything to worry about it. Kind of, so the video isn't resizing, just your time representation is changing. So, and if you're only working with, the video here, don't worry so much about the thumbnail, but if you hit F8, you could just have the thumbnail, just see the actual video window. And I would use that as the basis as opposed to worrying about like the thumbnail cache. So hopefully that helps, but let's go ahead and we'll move on. All right, so a question from Terry. Good to see you on a Hangout. Control room, when I route the audio output of my headphones bus, I can't seem to hear the different mix down presets. When I map the output to the main monitor bus, I can. How come? So I think that, so we go to the phones channel. Just make sure I'm reading this right. All right, so let me just set this up. And see if we could, I'll just go to my audio connections quickly. And I'll just jump back to our project. It has some sound in it. And activate this. Okay, so let's go to my control room and let's say we have our phones channel. All right, so let's see if this is going to output. I turn it up, you wouldn't mind. Okay, so now our audio is going out to the phones channel. That was okay. Guess all along I was so naive. Yeah, so it doesn't look like it goes through the down mix presets because it could be, I think the intention is, for the headphones for previewing, so it may not be routed directly through there. But I could pass that along as a suggestion, but I think it's kind of perhaps more of an intentional design for kind of what the purpose of the phones channel is, just as a quick headphone reference. It's not going to be affected by that, but I could pass that along, and that people would like to have the downmix presets with the phones as well. I'll just check to make sure there's not, could be one preference. I'll just check. All right, so I'm just going to check this use phone channels as preview channel and see if that makes any difference. I don't think it will, but let's give it a shot. Nah, the preference doesn't seem to have an effect on that. But I don't think that's really kind of what the phone channels was intended for. But I understand why that could be helpful. Okay, let's see a question. Hi, Greg. I use Elements 10.5 and I'm a new user. Is there a way to transpose a sample from library, not MIDI, to another? I.e., if I had a guitar sample in A flat, how can I transpose it to G flat? So I think you could do this in Elements, but let's say if I have this guitar part, I'll just pan it in the center here just momentarily. So let's say I'm just kind of playing. See if you have a transpose setting in the info line here. but you might be able to. So that would be like A flat to G flat. If I go back to the original. So you could definitely try that. So C, that's a way you could do it in Cubase. And another way you could do it, you know, if you wanted to add a transpose track, then this may be just a more of a Cubase Pro thing, but I could come here and say I want it to go up, all my tracks to go up one there. That was okay. And it would, you know, you could have particular tracks like drums, maybe not transpose, but you could have different transpose functions at different points in time. So you say, okay, I just want that transpose up to 3 or whatever value you want. But I would try to see if in Elements, if you could just do it from the info line, and you'll see just transpose, and you see fine tuning, that'd be cents, and transpose would be semitones. All right, so I'm seeing Agent K in a Hangout. Thanks for your help with moderation. That's great. Okay, hi Greg. What is the correct way to copy a project to a new folder location but avoid error message that says Cubase wants to reference audio files from old project location? Thanks. So if you just copy the, you know, the .cpr file, you know, just the Cubase project file itself, and that references audio files and, you know, many other, you know, audio file images that will be used in a particular project. So those will always be available. And as we start this, if you just do a save as and you save the project file, you know, it's going to still look in the same location, even if that's a different folder. So it's just referencing the location. So if you wanted to move the project and all of its contents to a fresh new folder, just select from the file menu, go to backup project. It'll ask you to create a new folder, a new and unique folder. So we'll come here, we'll call it September 22nd. And then what this will do, we'll choose that folder. We could choose to give it a new project name. We could keep the current project active, yes or no. We could minimize audio files. So we could also remove unused files. So if we did, you know, a 10-minute recording and used 5 seconds of it, if we choose minimize audio files, it won't have the 9 minutes and 55 seconds that aren't being used in the project. You could also make your direct offline processing permanent. If you recorded files that aren't in the project, you could choose to remove the unused files instead of backing those up. And you could also choose to have the video project backed up or not. So just come over here to File, to Backup Project, and that will allow you to define a new folder. And that way all the audio files that are being used in that project can be backed up into one location. Okay, so I see a question. Will free warp of multiple audio events in the main window be available in Cubase 11 if it's so time-consuming in the sample editor to fix time issues of vocals because you can't see events one above the other? So I can't comment if I knew what was going on in Cubase 11. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But a lot of times, you know, if you're doing vocals, what people are doing kind of free warping for is once you have kind of one vocal set up, consider doing some of the audio alignment. So we have a lot of people that miss that. So we'll just show how to run this. So, you see a lot of people spend a lot of time, getting timing of one vocal, and then they're like, oh, we have to do this manually for, a bunch of vocals that are stacked together. So let's say we have something like this. So if I said, okay, this is the file that I like, we could open up your audio alignment, click there. Let's select my other files here, and I'm going to add those. So the first one is a reference. The second ones are targets, and just say align audio. And at that point, you could have the program do the alignment for you, so you don't have to worry about, doing each track independently. So try that. All right, good to see Jazz Dude on a Hangout from Heidelberg. He's always incredibly helpful for answering questions before I get a chance to get there. All right, my timeline in the chat field just jumped on me. Bear with me just a second. Just find back where I was. Okay, so I see question. Hi, Greg. Hi, Greg. I have a question. After listening and testing for weeks now, I have come to the conclusion that ASIO Guard degrades the audio. It is very subtle, but it's there. Sounds that are up front and center move a little bit to the background and become slightly muffled. It's very subtle, but it's there. What do you think? I don't think that I'd be interested to see if you have, two different audio files, with ASIO Guard active and ASIO Guard not active. If you have those two files, like a lot of times, there's a function in WaveLab that's really interesting for these types of situations, because listening can be so incredibly subjective, but WaveLab has a function where you could take two audio files, and it's called an audio file comparator. And you could take two files that are the same length, and it will actually generate a delta file that is the difference between them. So when you use ASIO Guard, my inclination is to think that it wouldn't change the sound. I'm not doubting that it could, but it's not like kind of an audio process. It's going to be more for kind of buffering. But if you have two files and you want to pass them along, I'd be happy to take a listen to them and run them through WaveLab and see if it actually does make a difference. If that's the case, if you want to send me a download link, you can email it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. And I'd be happy to download those and experiment and see what I come across on my end. But I kind of would be inclined to say that it wouldn't do that, but I'm not absolutely sure. So. Okay, so I see Jay from Connecticut says there's over 80 viewers, but only 34 likes. Let's smash the like button for Greg. So I'll agree with Jay. So thanks. Okay. Okay, just reading through. All right, good to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas on the Hangout. Okay, so you see question. We kind of covered this a little bit earlier, but how to make curves in direct offline processing like we do in automation with holding down Command and Shift key. So, if I wanted to do offline processing, it could be based upon the tool that you have selected. So if you go to your direct offline processing, and let's choose our fade in. At this point, we could see different curves. So you have different curve types that you can see here, or if you want it to be very straight, and these will kind of work in conjunction with this. So if you don't want to see a curve, you could have just kind of straight, pointy lines like that. Or if you wanted it to be more curved, you could do more Bezier curves like that and be able to double click and have your different curve types there. So if that's where you mean, I'm not, there's a lot of different areas of where you could do in curves, but I assume if you're kind of referencing automation that it might be for like gains and fades and fade outs. All right. Hey, Greg. Greg here, wondering if there's any way to input a tempo change within a song via a key command, basically trying to avoid using my mouse to input a tempo change while film scoring. I think I've looked for this in the past and I was unable to find kind of like a key command. It seems something pretty basic, but if we had a tempo track, and let's say our tempo track was enabled to just, and maybe I'm being obtuse with this, but I think I'd looked in a previous Hangout. And I'll just do a quick search here for key command for do set definition and just take another. So, there's the Shift T to enter tempo, but I don't think it does it. So let's say if I come here, but I don't think it inserts it at the cursor position. So if I hit Shift T here, so while it changes, it doesn't necessarily, I'll just make sure. Yeah, so it kind of changes it when you hit Shift T, it doesn't insert it globally. So maybe if someone else, I haven't found a way to just, I could kind of put in, let me just say if I have a tempo point here and I go, let's say a tempo point here, and my song position is here, that if I input it, I think it may just change it globally. So let's say 144. So it's just going to change. It doesn't seem like there's a way to enter. So I could play around with it, Greg, and see if I could come up with, see if there's any other kind of back doorways I'm just kind of being obtuse and missing. but I looked on a previous Hangout and couldn't find a direct way to just kind of enter the node in. And, we could navigate to the different nodes, using the next key. But I could play around with it. If you want to send me just like an email reminder, I could see if we could have something for next Hangout, but I'll play around with it some more. Okay, just going. All right, so just see what is the right format or codec that Cubase 10.5 will accept import videos to Cubase. I tried MPEG and Avis, or maybe Avid, and didn't work. So I think with Avid DNX that there's an additional codec, but let's just take a look. I think, if you want to do this, when you have MPEG, there could be like 18,000 different versions of an MPEG. So I think we'll just go here. That there is a Help Center article. So I just typed in video support in Cubase. And here, this web page will tell you, okay, this is the codec, this is the container, what containers are supported within the codecs. If you, want to have an H.264 file, so supported video frame rates. So these will kind of be the video formats that you want to kind of be working with. So just, again, look for video support in Nuendo, Cubase, Wavelab, and Dorico, and that should get you in the right direction. So okay, so I just see how to make curves, envelopes using the draw tool and the audio clip for its gain settings. So I don't think that there's a way to do that for the clip gain. So if I come here, I'll just grab my pencil tool. So with this, there isn't a way to do kind of the, Bezier curves with the gain change. So if you wanted to do that, and I realize that it may make sense to have it pre-fader, but you could, do that quite easily in, let's say if I wanted to come here and be able to adjust kind of the curve, between 2 points. So, you may have to do that in the automation as opposed to the volume, the event clip volume there. All right. Okay, so I think it's Jay is asking about templates in Nuendo. So, Nuendo doesn't come with base templates. But if you, wanted to import the ones from Cubase, you could if you wanted to. Okay, so we have a question from John Day. I tend to mix down instruments to WAV files. Excuse me. Prior to adding reverb, compression, etc. Is there anything you should always be applied prior to mixdown? It's not going to really make a difference sonically if you put the reverbs on the instruments or mix them down. So I don't think, if it's, I know some people have kind of old, entrenched workflows that they kind of work that way, and maybe if you started a workflow and you kind of rendered things very quickly because maybe the CPU couldn't do a lot of instruments at the time, or your instruments kind of exceeded your CPU usage. But there's nothing to really be gained by doing that. And there is nothing that should always be applied prior to mixdown. So it's really, if you have the computing power to do it, but it's not going to really change the sound quality. All right. All right, so we're just seeing, all right, reading through comments. Okay, so we already covered about deleting points in direct offline processing. Okay, question. Could you show how to manually draw in modulation expression like with velocity, but to be able to automate modulation expression like with native instrument symphony brass from soft horn to dynamic? So it could really depend on, what that particular instrument responds to, but if it's modulation or expression, so we'll just take a quick look. So I'll just add a quick instrument track. So I'll come, let's say we have our amazing brass parts here. So you could just select, on your controller lanes, you could just come here and say, okay, I want it modulation. At this point, you could draw modulation in, and for a lot of sample instruments, that would automatically do the, add to like the level of expression. And if you wanted to do expression, you could just, again, draw in those different parameters. And if you wanted to come here, we could also just say, show use controllers. So let's say, so at this point, you could, just, open up the controller lane and you could save these as presets. So if you wanted to say, organize or add a preset, and you could just kind of draw in, modulation, expression, or whatever MIDI CC data you want to see there. Okay, just go through some more questions. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel. Okay, so I just see a question. Hi, Greg. What is the easiest way to punch in vocals anywhere on a workflow while recording vocals? So if you wanted to just, do vocal punches easily, so let's say, I'll just go to a different project here that has some vocals. Okay, so, if you wanted to, some of the easiest ways, and you could do this like from the transport. And, there's something called punch points as well. So you could, just come over here. So if you have I and O, that will activate. We can see this in the transport bar. So kind of just to the left of the transport, the main transport, hit I and O, and that could activate your punch in, punch out. So if you're tracking vocals and you need to punch, one particular word, you could just come here and say, I'm going to turn my snap off. And let's say you just needed a punch in right here. You could then hit the letter P, and that will set the left and right locators. But if you're doing a lot of vocal punches, come here to your Cubase preferences, and under editing, you could say cycle follows range selection. Now, the left and right locators are where the punch-in is going to occur. So now I have punch in and punch out active, I and O. So once I'm here, we have I, O. So as we do this, we could just punch, just like that. I could take it out of my loop mode. So let's say I just have that selected. It'll now punch and punch out. So I could come here again and say, just grab my range selection tool and say, okay, I needed to punch this phrase right there and just hit play. Lord, I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. And say, okay, we didn't like this phrase, so just select it with the range selection tool where you want to punch in, punch out. So once you kind of have that preference set, just select with the range tool, and you could leave the I and O enabled for punch in and punch out, and just select a range, hit play, and that's all you have to do. Okay, so question. If I want to import new sound into Groove Agent, is that possible, or is that only done in Beat Agent? So if you want to import your own sounds, like if you go to, with Groove Agent, there's an acoustic agent versus a beat agent. So the acoustic agent is going to be all done from the factory, and you can't import sounds there. So Groove Agent consists of, the Groove Agent SE has 3 agents, an acoustic agent, a beat agent. But if I wanted to incorporate and drag my own sounds in, that's when I would choose to use a beat agent, which is going to be slightly different in appearance. So let's say if I just come here to where we don't have kind of like, and we can think of the acoustic agent as being kind of like the virtual drummer, and this as being kind of more of an MPC paradigm. So the users don't really have the ability of making their own acoustic agent kits, but so to do that, you would need to do it in a beat agent. But the terminology is that Groove Agent has an acoustic agent and a beat agent, as opposed to just a Groove Agent and a beat agent. So, but you can't, the users aren't really set. It isn't designed for users to make their own acoustic agent kits because it's very involved. Okay. We're glad to see that Ace is back in the saddle with his Cubase use. And we're seeing Jeff Zabelski. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I use the Pool all the time to convert files tool. It's almost like a batch processor too. Pool audio folder easy. So, yep, you can do that as well. Okay. Reading through comments. See the Michael teams, it's cooling off for him, and you might be having rain from Hurricane Beta. So we hope you're safe through that. Okay. Okay, so just see, I've never heard of Reverence. Is that built into Cubase, or is it a VST add-on? So Reverence comes with Cubase and Nuendo, and that's the convolution reverb. So we'll send you a new feature next time you boot up your Nuendo, Jay. Your Reverence will be there, and just because you came to the Hangout, we're going to send it to you. So it's downloading right now in the background. I'm just kidding. All right. But yeah, it's a wonderful reverb plugin. Check it out. Okay, question: in event of MIDI crash, standard procedure for recovery. Cheers, buddy. So, I'm not sure if it's when you refer to a MIDI crash, if it is a program crashing. But, if the program does crash, what you can do is there is a preference, and you could set it to, when you go to preferences, to general, and you'll see an auto save interval. So you could have that automatically save. I think you could go down as small as every 30 seconds. All right. All right. So we see Pablo on a Hangout from Spain. Good to see you. And, if you show up late to the Hangout, we're not going to actually give you a tardy slip or anything. So you don't have to apologize, or we're not in school. So, okay. So we see Captainergy. I hope I'm saying that right. Okay. All right, so we see Sub 403 in a Hangout. He's saying my 9-month-old son, sorry, he's also apologizing he's late. His 9-month-old son wanted to stay up all night. My son was good at that too, so I understand. Okay. Okay, so just see from Mark Madsen. Hi, Greg. Hope you are well. Hope you and the family are well. We are doing great. Thanks for asking. Can I render a single instrument in a Halion 6 rack? So we'll just start a new project. Okay, I'll just kind of do... just go through a couple presets here. Okay, so let's say I just, I have an instrument track, so I think it was from a rack. Instrument was a question. So I will remove this. Sorry about that. Okay, so say I just have a single instrument and okay, so I think I should have one long MIDI note there. So say if just render it, so I could just come directly here to my edit menu and we'll just render in place. So I'll just choose dry, so I don't have any effects on it. And then as we look at that, that's going to be our single instrument from a rack. And we'll go ahead and just listen to it. So that's how you could do it. Okay, question from Ted Springman. Good to see you on a Hangout, Ted. Will recording at 32-bit instead of 24 add any additional noticeable stress to a trash can Mac system with UA Apollos and UAD plugins? I don't think you'll notice any huge difference for having the, for using 32-bit float instead of 24-bit. So. And I haven't done a test, but it's not like you have if you're running a trash can Mac, that you have a lot of different, it's not like it's a really old computer that's going to be kind of on the edge. So you just see the Retro Log 2 is very powerful. What will C11 surprise us with in this sense? I guess we'll have to wait till Cubase 11 comes out, but we'll see how it goes. Okay. Okay, so just see or a comment from Corey S. Sexton. Awesome, thank you so much for the bass ARP thing. I switched from Sonar to Cubase. I'm still learning my way around. Congratulations, we're happy to have you as a Cubase user, and great to see you on a Hangout, and hope you can participate in more Hangouts, and please let us know any other questions you have. So question, what's the easiest way to browse through MIDI loops in MediaBay and apply them to a live ARP like Apache SX? I can never find an easy way. Okay, so let's come over here. And so let's go look through some MediaBay stuff and let's find some MIDI loops. I think I have some in here. So I'll just go ahead, let's say like a clavinet. Okay, so if I wanted to, okay, so I'm just going to double click and add that, and let's go to, we'll just find kind of maybe like a electric piano. All right, so let's go open under the MIDI inserts for this particular track. I'm going to open up my Apache SX. And we can go to sequence. And at this point, I just drag this into the project. And I could just drag this particular sequence in. So now I'm just kind of playing in the basis of the arpeggio based on a chord I play. So if I play like a C minor chord. So you may have to just drag it to the timeline and then just drag that, directly to the clip, and now, and of course I picked the worst sound of all time, so let's just say if I'm here, I'll just select a sound that's less hideous. So I just kind of play one chord and it's going to just play based on that particular arpeggio. So try dragging it from the MIDI loops to the project window. But I'll see if I could do it directly from... Yes, it doesn't look like it. So it doesn't look like it drags it directly, but try to just drag it to the project window and then from the project window into Apache and see if that does the trick. All right, so just see a comment from John Costigan. Thank you, Greg. Tempo detection and setting track to musical mode is exactly my problem for the day. Psychic, you decide. It's a problem that a lot of people have, so it's usually pretty applicable for a lot of projects. But I'm glad if it helped you out, John. So. Okay, so question from Jay. Hi, Greg. Hoping your family are safe. We are. I always, just saying, you always learn something from these Hangouts. It's great. I do too. So I enjoy doing them because, it's just fascinating to see how, the questions we get and how people are using stuff. Okay. Question from Keep Town, I believe. Hello. How can I export MIDI file with Inspector Patch and Automation both? Because one of them is disabled. Is it possible to export both bank and patch number and CC automation? Regards. So if we have a MIDI part here, so I'll just remove some tracks. So just right click here. Let's remove selected tracks. Okay, so I have... Okay, so there's my new 21st century composition for Gareth to use in the project. Okay, so at this point, I have some MIDI CCs. So I'll draw some in. So let's say we got modulation, and maybe let's just draw in some volume. And at this point, I have from the inspector, I assume most people would be putting in, if you wanted to put in bank and program changes, but let's just say I set my channel and I will add a MIDI track. So let's say on this, I'm going to have and I'll route it to, let's say, to hardware. And I wanted this to go to, let's say, here's my bank and program change. And I've copied this data here. So what you could do, I think, let's go ahead and just check. And I just want to go to my MIDI file preferences because this may do it automatically for us. So let's just Okay, so if you come over here, you could say you wanted to export automation and export inspector patch. So when I come here, I'm just going to do export this as a MIDI file. Okay, so here we could choose, you get these export options. So you say export the selector patch. Okay, and now when I come, I'll save this. Just in case I need to call it up. Okay, so I'll close this project and let's import your MIDI file. We'll create a new project. Let's go to my desktop. Okay, and as we've done this, we can now see within the MIDI file that if we go to this particular part, and let's look in the list editor, so you had the program change, your controller messages, kind of all incorporated within that. Let's come over here and let's look in the list editor. And here you can see the different controllers and your note messages. So we see both CC7 and CC1 that we drew in. So that's all kind of included within the MIDI file. So, you know, there is that one little preference for including the patch data. Now, if you don't do that, what you could do, if you do like MIDI files, and you want them to be kind of fail-proof, if we have a lot of different settings for our MIDI files here in the inspector, what you could do is just go to the MIDI menu and choose to freeze MIDI modifiers. And that will embed all, so the inspector kind of, as the MIDI plays back, it gets processed through the inspector settings here. And a lot of times these inspector settings aren't actually inside, they're not embedded within the actual parts. So if you want to embed these settings within these parts, that's when you go to MIDI and choose to freeze MIDI modifiers. And that embeds the parameters that were assigned here into the individual parts. Then you could export it. But just by, you know, having that particular preference enabled, you know, on MIDI files to export inspector patch, that should do it for you. Just see a comment from Ted. Greg is moonlighting as an EDM artist under a pseudonym. I think I'll use Pablo's name as my moniker, so I'll be La Leche. So, okay. Okay, and one more question. Is there some easy way to delete MIDI notes outside of MIDI clip cheers? So, you know, if you wanted to just, you know, come and, you know, you could erase a MIDI part using the eraser tool. If you wanted to delete a specific note, so let's say, like, so I'm looking at this and I wanted to delete all notes that were our E3. I could probably just go to my logical editor. So let's say, so I have a bunch of notes that are E3 here. So I could go to my MIDI to I could select the event or events, go to MIDI to logical editor, and I could choose to delete, type is equal to notes, and value 1 is equal to E3, not E34. All right, so we'll say E3. And now when I hit apply, we'll just look at this part. And all my E3 notes are gone. If we undo, all the E3 notes appear. So you could kind of use the logical editor to delete specific MIDI messages if you wanted to. All right. I'm going to continue on and not read an email from Zed for you guys. All right. I'll read it after the Hangout. Just kind of came in my notices here. All right. Very nice guy. All right. Dismiss another email. Just popped up. Okay. All right, so I just see a question. Did you know that Cubase is a German software? Yep. Yeah, the development's done out of Hamburg. Yeah, started by Charlie Steinberg and Manfred Rurup. Okay, just seeing, right, my chat line jumped on me, so let me just jump back. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay. Okay. Okay, so you see, hi Greg, can monophonic drums wave recording be converted to MIDI so I can assign to Groove Agent 5 and with it VariAudio is used, what correct setting to choose in drop-down menu? So you don't have to do it within VariAudio, so you could do it actually within a hit point editor. So I'll jump to this project. So let's say I have drums. And let's say if I wanted to replace the drums, I have a Groove Agent kit here. So let's say I just have some. So if I wanted to augment or replace the drums or trigger drum samples, I could just double click. This will open up the sample editor, go to the hit points tab. We want to just kind of set the threshold, and you could often just kind of eyeball this and make sure that it's actually the kicks that are being triggered. So let's just listen. And at this point, I'm going to say create MIDI notes. When we do that, I can say, let's put it on. I'm going to retain the original dynamic velocity. You can see C1, and I'm going to hit OK. And as we've done that, it's now created a MIDI track. And this MIDI track will now start to trigger the MIDI. So if I wanted to mute the kick drums, we're now taking that performance and just dragging it. And if I want to do the same for the snare, so I'll just say, let's create MIDI notes, and I'll put it onto D1 and hit OK. And I'll mute the snares from the audio. And let's say I want to make the snare a little louder. And maybe tune the snare. And blend the audio and the samples back together. And so that's all you really had to do. So just, double click, go to the hit points tab, kind of set the threshold so that like your snare is not picking up hi-hats and kick that's bleeding through, and just choose to create MIDI notes, and you could assign it to create a new track or to an existing track, and you could just do kind of your drum replacement there. Okay, so just see Millard Brown says, got to get to work setting up some customer guitars. I'll be watching but can't comment. Oh, that's good. I'm going to have to call you or reach out to you for setup questions, Millard. Thanks, but hopefully we'll see you back on later. Okay, so I just see how to show the clock-like pan in the mix section. So what you want to, if you want to see that, and it's probably, if I assume it's, I think we'll see it in this project here. So I'll activate this. Let's get to the mix console. When we look at the panners, we see kind of the panners that look like this. And when we see the panners kind of switch to that mode, that means that there is a surround bus in the project. So when I go to my studio connections here, I could go directly to my audio connections. And when I go to my outputs, I can see that I have a 5.1 out that's been defined in this project. So when I remove my 5.1 bus, we'll notice that the panners will probably become more traditional, what people look for. So watch as I click remove. Now the panners will be kind of set more traditionally, what people expect to see. Okay, just reading through comments. So we're seeing some discussion on Behringer gear. All right. All right, so just seeing a comment from Ted. I thought Greg suggested Yamaha keeps a creative wall up and just lets Steinberg do its thing. Personally, I don't see harm in keeping an open door. Oftentimes, these acquisitions have synergies. So, it's, Yamaha is done, I think, it's been 15 and a half years. And I think they've done a great job of, maintaining the Steinberg brand as they have with Line 6 and Bosendorfer. And, also Ampeg, or some other companies that kind of fall, within the Yamaha umbrella. So, but, whatever kind of, we obviously want to work with our Yamaha, the Yamaha for hardware, and they make our audio interfaces, and we work closely with them so that we could have kind of a real great synergy between us, but they don't limit us from working with other companies. Okay. Okay, so I see, hi Greg, what are the key commands to place MIDI parts vertically? I know for horizontal it's control, like left, right arrow, but it doesn't work with the upper, lower arrow. So I think this is kind of an odd key command, and I think, so let me just... Okay, so like for moving any part up or down, all right, so I think this is found in a nudge key command category. So, So I'll come over here and we'll choose nudge. So I think if you just use nudge up and down, so let me just try this. Let me see if I can get a key command combination. Okay, so I'm going to hit like Option or Alt Shift up. Or I'll just hit Alt Shift down for down. And for up, I'm just going to hit Alt Shift up and assign that. So let's say I have an instrument part. I'll just assign it to no instrument. And this works for audio as well. Or I'll just add a number of audio tracks. So now that I have that particular key command set up, I can just use that key command. So just up and down under the nudge category. So I'm just holding down Alt plus Shift plus the up arrow. And that will allow you to move your different tracks up and down to, so again, even if we had just this particular part split, I can now just take this part here and just move that up and down. So the key command, I think if I'm understanding correctly, you'll just come over here under nudge for down and up. So don't know why it's not assigned by default. It would be nice. Okay, so I see a comment from Jazz Dude that Yamaha Germany was always located in Rellingen, very near to Hamburg. I bet that's the reason the connection happened. I mean, Yamaha Music and Hi-Fi. So, there was, I think that Yamaha was, trying, before the Pinnacle acquisition was trying to get involved with that as well. But, we've always had a lot of synergy working with Yamaha, primarily from development in Japan and Hamamatsu and Hamburg. And, we go back to doing, the very first hard disk recorders like in 1995 with on Atari and PC. So it was the first integrated professional audio recording system for PC as well. For, if you get into like the Yamaha CBX D5 and Yamaha CBX D3 and getting into Yamaha DSP factory. So, okay, so I just see, where did the logical presets go in Cubase 10.5? So, we've had this question a couple of times, but I think, and John Costigan had mentioned that there is a YouTube video, a lot of times just doing taking your preferences and restoring them. So if you hold down Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift while booting up the program, restoring your preferences can be there. But there's also apparently, and John had emailed it to me, if you want to, but there's a YouTube video that shows another technique, and if you just kind of Google recover VST or logical editor presets and other Cubase settings or something like that, there's a video that has helped a lot of people with that. Okay, so I just see Paul Claridge. I'm trying to control reverb, mix, and Hallian with a quick control assigned to my controller. Okay, so let's go ahead and just do a new project here. Okay, so say if you have your quick controls set up, let's just all right, so I will come over here to like the mixer. So now when you play, all right, so let's say if I just wanted to come over here, let's have a reverb. So let's just say we'll go to our Reverence. So dry, and we come here. Okay, so just so I'm trying to control reverb mix. So let's just say I'm here with a quick control. So now what I could do is I'll go to my quick controls and let's just unload them. And then I'm going to click on to learn here. And then let's see if this works. Okay, let's just... Okay, you can do a learn CC and be able to adjust. All right, but let's see if we could do it for our quick controls. So I'll just take that out of learn. And let's go to our Hallian 6, slot 1. So even if you come over here to your sends, you could say your send level. So I will just come over here. Let's see if we can. But that's really all you'd have to do is just kind of set your send level there if you're doing it as a send effect. But if you're doing it kind of internally, let's see if I can just... All right, let me just... Okay, so let's say we want to do send 1. And let's put the reverb in here. I'll just do a delay just to... so we could hear that. So now... I'll take this out of learn mode. So you should be able to just kind of go to your send level there, and that will do it to your send. But let's say if you want to do the mix parameter, a lot of times it will... Let's see if we can... So I think if you just kind of come over here to slot and then, yeah, I don't see just that mix parameter, but I could play with it some more and get that. But you could always just learn CC and just move the knob with the CC instead of using a quick control as well. Okay, see question. Hi, Greg again. What's the best algorithm to transpose an acoustic guitar in vocals? Thanks. So, it could depend on, every track could be slightly different, but I'll just come over here where we have, I think my Beatles and Stones track has some acoustic guitar. So I'll just solo the guitar and a vocal here. Activate the project. Okay. Now you're asking Beatles. So I'm going to just select these audio files here, and I'm going to start off with, instead of standard mix, I'm going to go to elastic, and I will say time for the guitars, and for the vocals, I'm going to say elastic pitch. Okay, so turn it up, you wouldn't mind. So now if I up until that was okay. So I'll just bounce this selection so we have a new file. Okay. So, and for this file, I'll just choose elastic pitch. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones. Leave them alone. You don't know the words. You're scratching the vinyl. You get on my nerves. All right, so I'll just go ahead and select these. I'll select the guitars and voice. Okay, so now we played our records into the night. Let's say if we want to go up one. I turn it up, you wouldn't mind. Up until now. So I would probably use the elastic pitch for vocals and maybe for guitar time. That's probably what I would do. Let's go ahead and revert this. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you have learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if it's your first hangout, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed a little bit. Okay, question. Can you explain a little more about setting up device panel for old hardware, please? This is probably an area of the program I'm not super proficient at. I haven't done this in a long time. I used to make mixer maps back in the day. So let's take a look at what we could do for this. So let's say I'll go to more options, and let's get to our MIDI device manager. And what we could do, we're going to, we could install a device, and you could have a generic new, or if you wanted to have some of the older, if you have different hardware devices with different program changes. So let's say, like I wanted to have, a Yamaha Mo XF. So I'll just come over here and So now you could go over here, click on your device panels, and you could click on add panel. Now you could have kind of a generic size. You could have it to be fit within the inspector or channel strip size. So that could fit within the mix console. So let's say I want to build, and at this point we could choose different parameters. So let's add, okay, so let's say I come here, I will, let's say for channel 1, I haven't done this in forever, sorry. But what this is going to allow you to do basically is to say we want it to have different objects, and we could have these kind of automatically okay, so let's say, okay, so now we could say I want to add a parameter. It's going to be 0 through 127. It could be a sysx. It could be, you know, standard MIDI CC messages. So, and now that you have, and I could read up and kind of get better at this for Friday's Hangout, but let's say, let's add, so you could add different subnodes, but basically what you could do is kind of make like a virtual panel, and I'm just kind of like one mouse. Let's say if I go to my objects, so, but what you're able to do, and I'll see if I could have this more dialed in for next time. If you want to send me just an email reminder, but you know, you could come over here and just kind of switch between, you know, where you can make your own. Okay, so I think if we go here, let's add parameter. I want this to be, okay, so now if we double click on the parameter, so you could import different bitmaps, but let's say if we have this, but I'm just kind of noodling around, so probably wasting everyone's time. But I'll try to have more of an answer on Friday. I'll play around with it, and where I can show you something a little more coherent. Sorry about that. So I just see a question. Is this Fruity Loops, FL Studio? Now we're looking at Cubase. All right. So I see question or comment. Relatively new to music production. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on send effects and how to use them. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at sends. Let me just close this out. Okay, so when we have effects, we may want to have like, you know, a reverb that's the same reverb on our drums, our voice, guitar, so they sound like they're in a particular room. So what I've done here is we can add an effects channel track. So I will come over here. I will bypass. Let's listen to our vocal dry.
I was so naive. Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave.
Now, if I put an insert effect, that insert effect is only going to be available for that one particular channel. So I see a lot of people do this starting off, and they put a reverb on every single channel as an insert. So the insert is dedicated to a particular channel, whereas a send, you can send multiple tracks to that same reverb. So I will come here. Let's add a effect send. So I'm going to add, let's say, a Reverence. I'm going to add, let's make her sound like she's singing in like an English chapel. So we'll come over here. So as we do this, I want to select this. We'll go to our sends, and I'm going to say, we're going to go to, this is probably the Reverence we just created. And as we listen to it,
our musical history,
I will just kind of blend this in.
I've got to choose.
So we could blend the signal in. So the more that we move to the right, the more of the reverb is introduced with the dry signal. So we'll listen again.
Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones.
And if I go to my acoustic guitars,
something about that just sounds so wrong.
I could have these guitars go to the same reverb. So instead of using 3 separate reverbs, which can take a lot of processing power, I could send these tracks, the guitars and the voice, to one common reverb. So as we listen to it now,
what is to it away to start a fight? Take the records that you like. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones.
That way those multiple tracks are being fed into this one auxiliary, is being sent out to this one effect via the send. So you could have varying amounts of multiple tracks going to the same effect. So I see lots of people have 24 tracks and they have 22 reverbs, all doing the same thing as inserts. So don't do that. Run one insert or run one effects send to an effects channel, and then you could have each of the tracks can access that same reverb. So you have that kind of appearance of being cohesive when you're doing it. Okay, so Michael Teams is wanting people to whack the like button, so I won't disagree again. Okay, so we have Lawrence checking in from Bangkok. Good to see you on the Hangout. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. How can I import my own drum loops into the media folder? So it's really easy. All you have to do is don't think of it as importing it into the media folder. Just think of it as having the media folder find your loops for you. So if you wanted to come here, you could go to like your media browser. You could go to your file browser and just look anywhere on your system. So if you wanted to go to this computer, to, let's say, in documents, and I wanted to find in projects all of my audio files. So I could just kind of come here, and now we could just, have all of my different files. Now, if it's to the point where you're like, oh, okay, this is where my favorite folder with all of my drum loops is at, and you wanted to access that quickly, all you have to do is right-click on a particular folder and choose to add a favorite. So now we go home to our browsing. So we'll give it a name. So we'll call it September 22. So I will jump back home, and now I could just go to favorites and say, okay, let's go to September 22nd. And there's my folder. So you could do that in the kind of the smaller MediaBay, or go to the full MediaBay, and here you could just, go through everything here. So let MediaBay search for your loops. So, MediaBay could go through, your entire computer. And if you see a check mark just to the left of that, that means that MediaBay is going to look into that folder. So if you're like, okay, I don't want MediaBay searching through all of my photography pictures, you could just tell MediaBay not to go there. And, at that point, you could just go back and forth very easily and tell, which particular folders that MediaBay should be looking into, and that will reflect in either the large MediaBay or the MediaBay in the right-hand zone. All right. Just see a comment from Ted Springman. When Cubase version 11 is about to launch, it'd be cool to invite one of the Hamburg developers via VST Connect as a hangout special guest to help Greg brag about the new features. No, it sounds like a cool idea. So whenever Cubase 11 comes, that could be something we might be able to do. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Please explain UV22HR and its purpose. Thanks. So what the Apogee, this is the Apogee UV22HR. So this is a dithering algorithm. So you'll find it under the mastering tab, I believe. And what this is going to do is when we deal with audio that's recorded at a higher resolution or higher bit depth and sample rate, and we need to deliver it at a lower resolution, and we want to maintain kind of the sonic integrity of the original file. So let's say, we've done a whole project, we record at 24-bit, and we need to, at 96K, and we want to make CDs that are 16-bit 44.1. So there's a lot of information that could get lost between 24-bit 96K to 16-bit 44.1. So what dithering does is it kind of adds, it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but it adds specific noise so that you can have the sound of the higher resolution when delivering a lower resolution file. So that's what the Apogee UV22 does. So when you're exporting your files, and everything is at a higher resolution, you need to export to other resolutions, you have that capability to still not lose the quality. Okay, hi Greg. Why can't I change the color of several selected tracks at once? I think Steinberg has to revisit that in comparison with Studio One. So I think it's pretty easy to do. So let's just come over here. All right. So let's say I wanted to take all of these tracks here, and I'd go to my color palette, and let's make them all kind of green. They're all green. If I wanted to select all these tracks in the track field, so if I have the track selected, I wanted these all to be yellow. At this point, you could just choose for them all to be different colors, and we'll just start with a new project here and just add. So I will come here. Let's say we have 16 tracks or whatever. Okay, and I wanted all these tracks to be the same color. Again, just kind of come here. Let's go to the color, select the color tool, and now they're all yellow, they're all green. If we have events that are in the files here, so let's say, okay, I have an audio file here. All right, and I'll just randomly drag some files over. So if I want all these to be, blue, I could select all of the events here. So they're green, doing those colors. Let's say I select them all and want to make them blue. I can make the events different colors. So again, just kind of select all these, select, the color tool, select a color, and you can change, multiple tracks, multiple events, kind of all at once. So that seems pretty easy to me. So, but let me know if that works differently for you. I don't think it will, but if it's all right. So I just see from Sven Isaacson, would anyone else enjoy hearing the Beatles Stone song that Greg keeps playing snippets of and narrating over in its entirety? I guess I could do that, but I would check with, I may have to check with the composer of it just to make sure. But I'm sure that, he's thrilled that people like his song. So. Okay. Hi, Greg. Is there a single command I can assign to my MIDI controller that would allow me to scroll through the different quantize grid, i.e. use bar, use beat, use quantize? All right, so let's take a look. Let's take a look through the generic remote. So let's say, okay, so we have it now on bar. So I will come to a generic remote. I'll go to my studio menu to studio setup. Let's go to generic remote, and I wanted to have a note on message. So I'm just going to hit a note on my keyboard controller here. Okay, so that's captured. And let's go to command. Okay, let me just find a particular function. So I'll just do a quick search for it here. Okay, so it's under edit. Okay, so we see select next grid type. All right. So now when I hit that note, you see go to beat, I hit the note again, use quantize, adapt to zoom, bar. So I could just hit that one MIDI note with my controller and be able to kind of toggle between the different settings. So once again, to do that, go to studio menu, to studio setup. You can set your MIDI message here. So this is the incoming MIDI message, and then we tell it what we want that MIDI message to do. So we say we're going to go to fader 1, to command, edit, and select next grid type. So you could just hit that MIDI note, and we could watch right here, it switch between your different grid types. Okay, it says, hello, I have a problem. I need a key combination for repeat my last action in Cubase. Is there a function in Cubase? I don't know if there's a, you could repeat events, but I'm not sure if you could repeat the last function or the previously used function. I don't know of a way to do that. So I see a question, can we expect Cubase 11 fourth quarter this year? So I think Cubase 11 will be released when it's ready. So I'm not sure, it hasn't been announced yet. So. All right, good to see Grant Nicholas on the Hangout. Hope you're doing well. All right, my chat line jumped on me. Let me just go back. All right, I see lots of German or Dutch in my future. All right, with comments. Okay. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. I wish I could read German better. Sorry. But all my friends at Steinberg speak English so well. I feel badly. Okay, so we have a question. So I have Cubase Elements 10 looking to upgrade to Pro 10.5. What is the control room thing for exactly? So what we could use the control room for is a lot of, interesting aspects. So, it was originally kind of set up so if you have a lot of people, when mixing in a DAW, noticed that they were using their master fader as their monitoring volume and inadvertently having kind of bad gain structure in their mixes, because if their monitors are cranked really, high, they may try to have this down, and when they export their mix, they are losing a lot of bits, and it's kind of a low volume mix, or it's too loud. So the control room allows you to have not only just a separate monitoring level that isn't affected by the mix itself. So let me just play something here quickly. Okay, so as we work with this, now if we have more than one pair of speakers, which is pretty common as well, you could go to your monitors and you could say, okay, I want to listen to my HS7s, my JBLs, my Gentle X, and Auratone, and you could have 4 different speakers that you switch between. Each of these speakers can have their own dedicated inserts, and they could also have their own dedicated volume control. So if you switch and you wanted to have consistent monitoring levels, you could do that. We could also, when we listen to it, we could say, so you can see that as I adjust, we're not affecting the gain structure of the master fader. It's just my volume. Here we could also choose to, dim it. So if we want to drop it by, 12 dB or whatever, and you could set the amount of how much is dropped down by your by your dim amount here. There's also a listen bus. If you wanted to solo tracks, you could do that. But through the control room, you could also have a listen bus. So I could click that, and the other tracks will be dimmed, but you can still hear it kind of in context. So soloing mutes every other track. But you could hit the L button and that dims the other tracks. If you want to do like mono down mixes to listen to it, you could listen to it in stereo. Or mono. You could bring in other sources. So let's say someone comes in and have an iPad and they're like, oh, let's just listen to that. You could have external inputs. You could also have full headphone mixes directly within the control room. So that's just kind of a quick overview of some of the stuff that the control room offers. So I think once you upgrade from your Cubase elements, you'll be happy once you kind of dive into it. Hi, Greg. Wondering if you remembered what your friend said about auto time saves. I asked him about it in an email, and I didn't hear back from him, but I'm speaking with him tomorrow, Nick. So if you want to send me an email, hopefully I'll have an answer. But I'll bring it up in our conversation tomorrow. I'm supposed to speak with him at 3 o'clock, I think. Okay, there's lots of comments in German today. Sorry, I apologize for being a dumb American who only speaks English and a little bit of Spanish. Okay, so you just see, why is it that my track is not making the MIDI notes? So, if you have, if we have a track, it's hard to know from the question, but there's a couple things to check. So one is to make sure that first that you're receiving MIDI. So let's say, let's see what sound this is. Just pick a random sound here. Okay. All right. So you want to make sure that, you have MIDI coming in. So you'll see like a MIDI in and out light when you have a MIDI controller. So if you're hitting your MIDI keyboard and you're not seeing activity here in the lower left-hand corner, you can do that. Now, if you have your track loaded and it's record enabled for it to send MIDI or monitored, so make sure that track, so you could if you see MIDI coming in and don't hear, make sure that track is set to record enable or monitor. If you see that, if you don't see your MIDI, when you hit notes on your MIDI controller, if you don't see that activity, you could also hit Alt or Option plus K, and you could use your computer keyboard just as a MIDI controller and see if that's working. So you also want to make sure that this, you have your MIDI input port, that is being, that's coming in from your controller, and where that MIDI message is being sent to is directly below that. And you make sure that it's being sent on the correct MIDI channel. So you could see the MIDI channel here. So if I go to and open up my Halion Sonic SE here, so I have a sound on channel 1, but if I go to MIDI channel 2, and we can think of these almost like TV channels, and let's say there's nothing loaded in MIDI channel 2 of this instrument, I'm not going to hear anything. So make sure you have the right MIDI channel as well. So hopefully those things will help, but if I'm misunderstanding, just let me know. All right, seeing a nice comment about Yamaha from Jeff. Yamaha has best integrity, period, always quality. Geez, the pianos, digital, everything Yamaha does is ahead of the game in innovation and quality. Not many dare to make oboes either. Yeah, I think one statistic I heard is 1 in 4 instruments in the world is a Yamaha instrument. So it's a pretty proud company. You know, I'm pretty proud to work for the company. They do some great products. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we see, Greg, how to exchange the velocity values of a whole track to like 30% less, and how to raise and decrease with the corner hooks. So let's say if I just did a really bad recording here, I'll just get some velocities. All right, so say I have some soft. Or now I want to play chords. Okay, so if I wanted to do some quick velocity, so let's say this is my velocity indication here. So if I select all the notes, we see that I'll just kind of bring this up. But if I wanted to decrease velocity, I could just decrease all the velocity amounts proportionally just by going to the center at the top. If I wanted to compress to make them all kind of closer, or expand to make those velocity changes, to make those changes more dramatic, I could do that. If I go to the lower or upper right hand corner, I could tilt, or upper left hand corner, and then upper right hand corner, I could just kind of could do like almost like a fade out of the velocity values. Something else that a lot of people miss, especially on chords, I'll just make this larger. A lot of times when you have a chord, you may say, oh, this velocity, I wanted to raise just the velocity of one note. So if you hold down Control plus Shift, you could adjust the velocity of one note within a chord. So you can say, I want this to be higher velocity. So even though you played all 3 notes, and this comes in handy with drum editing, like where you may have multiple sounds playing at once, you could still adjust the velocity value, and you could see just on the left-hand side what the velocity value is as you kind of just drag up and down, holding the left mouse button down. So, and if you wanted to do with, let's say I wanted to decrease this by 30%, I could go to my logical editor. And what I want to do is we'll say transform. We'll say events are equal to notes. And then we're going to say value 2, which is velocity. Okay, so, and what I want to do is just say we want to take value 2. Okay, I'll just say we're going to take MIDI notes, and then we're going to take value 2 velocity, and then we could say multiply by 0.7. And now if I did this correctly, I could just hit apply. I'll select the events here and hit apply. And you could just, I'll just say, let's say events type is equal to notes. And now as I come here, I could just decrease all those by 30%. So again, you can say type is equal to note, value 2, which in a MIDI note message, value 1 is going to be pitch, or the MIDI note, value 2 is the velocity. So we can say multiply by 0.7, and then just, you can see the velocity still keep its proportionality like that. So there's a couple tips on velocity. I think this is Jazz Dude just translating for us. Thanks for the question. All right. All right, so we have Claudio from Brazil thanking us for the video. Hopefully it's helpful. So, okay. Okay, so I just see from Alex Hollingsworth, hi Greg, for some reason, every time I use a different interface output, the outputs default to not connected instead of using outputs 1 to 2, for example. Is there a way of preventing this? So if you're kind of switching, sometimes what you could do to kind of circumvent this is just by saving like a preference, like a audio connections, and for your inputs or outputs, try just saving a preset like for your outs of where you want that to be, and also for your control room. So a lot of times if there's a preset that may kind of take priority, it seems like, I haven't tested it, but I would try just to save a preset, and then whatever it is, you could just simply hit F4 and open up connections without having to manually reset them all the time. All right. Okay, so I just see a comment. Thanks for answering, but I need free warp in the main window to align offbeat vocals or audio notes of an instrument to tracks above, below freely, or warp multiple tracks recorded with 2 mics. So so currently there isn't a multi-track free warp. So, but a way to do that, especially an instrument where you've done editing and it's recorded on 2 mics, is just, the alignment works, great for different, not just for vocals as well. Hi, Greg. My Contact full version seems to be a RAM hog. Can I import free Contact files or libraries into Halion 6? You can. So you could definitely, most of the libraries will be copy protected. So there will be kind of like an encryption. So out of respect for intellectual property, because we want someone doing it to us, we don't try to break the encryption. So it could really depend upon the library itself. So, but you may be able to add more, to give Contact some more RAM as well with, like in Halion, we're like an available preload amount. So you may be able to adjust that. All right, so we see Sir Robert from Atlanta logging in. And yes, you missed the LM4 giveaway by only 20 years, Robert. All right, so we see some moderation by Agent K, so we appreciate that. Okay, so we have a question from @thesource_studios. Hey, Greg, I have multiple MIDI controllers hooked up. eKit, piano, MIDI keyboard. Is there a way to assign just 1 or 2 to a VST? So when you do this and you go to like your MIDI inputs, by default, Cubase will try to capture all the different MIDI devices as all MIDI inputs. But all you'd have to do is to just choose a specific MIDI driver, a MIDI input port. So if you wanted to have from, let's say, from Groove Agent or from, like, I have my Nectar P4, so you could just choose and select a very particular input, and then it's not going to see, like, your electronic drum kit is only going to go to your electronic drums and is not going to play a piano sound just because it's set to all MIDI inputs. Okay, so just reading through. Right, reading through the different discussions. Okay. Okay, so let's just reading through. All right, so we have a question. How do you get Melodyne off your vocal after you process it, and also keep my Melodyne fit? So, if you wanted to, probably as you do your processing, if you've done processing on a particular audio file, so let's say if I jump here, I don't have Melodyne. I haven't really used it in a while. But I'll just do a quick process here. So let's say I just want to do a fade in of that. So now when you go into like your project folder, you should see, and I think if we jump over here, I don't think we see it in the pool. But if I go over to, let's say, my projects, right, and I will open up this folder and let's go into the audio folder, or you'll see an edits folder. So any of the edits, this is where I think the original files, you could try looking into your edits folder and see if that helps. But, Melodyne can be handled a little differently because it's doing, ARA2, or if you're just running it as a plugin, it could make a difference. But if you're just running it as a plugin, you could and you've processed it, you're going to be doing it through the offline process history, so if I come and let's say I do my offline process history, and let's say I run it through Melodyne, and I run it through different plugins, whatever I want to do at this point, select a file, hit F7, and then you could, if you processed it this way, you could just go back and to say, remove just that one process, or remove all of them. So you can remove each process independently in a non-linear fashion, or just do, all of them at a time. Okay, and I just saw there's some discussion of the Neve console as a giveaway, and when Sir Robert came in late. And speaking of Neve, anyone try Yamaha's take on an R&D 5033 EQ? That's a really wonderful emulation, a physical modeling of that, and it was done by Dr. K of Yamaha, and it was really the first physical modeling process that Rupert Neve has actually, given his blessing to. Of all the plugins that bear his name, that's the only one that's actually approved by Rupert Neve Designs and Rupert Neve. So you see a question, will Cubase 11 allow multi-ounce to go full signal path? So is that maybe multi-outs? And again, we can't really comment on Cubase 11 stuff until it's out. Okay, so I just see a question. When using stereo enhancer, I notice it sounds different when using pre or post fader. Is there a reason, scenario, proper way to have it in either position? I think most people would run the stereo enhancer as an insert effect. So, whatever sounds good, there's no definite rules with you using kind of spatial enhancement plugins, whatever works and works for your project. Then, I think if it sounds good, it's good. So. Okay, so just saying this, probably I think a further explanation says, how do you get Melodyne off your vocal after you process it and also keep my Melodyne fit? And then I think it was, this was about the audio to MIDI. So I'm not sure, so I'm not sure if I understand the question, but maybe. So I'm not sure if you have the MIDI part on the project window or how that's handled through Melodyne. So. So I see a question. What are some of your go-to VSTs outside of what Cubase has to offer? The Rupert Neve plugins are really pretty exceptional. For instruments, I do like, having multiple kits within Groove Agent, and especially the percussion agent. I think Backbone, if you're doing any type of sound design, or if you're a guy that sits there and sculpts your 808 kick drums, that's a pretty wonderful plugin for that. Halion for making your own instruments. The Iconica is really wonderful for orchestral stuff. I used to be like an orchestral musician in my previous life, so I could appreciate all of that as well. But the plugins in Cubase are really pretty wonderful. Okay, so we see Robbo has to go. Just thanking me for, you learned a lot, so that's good to hear. Okay, just going through. Okay, so just see question, Greg, is the sole purpose of musical mode to preserve pitch during time stretching, or does it do anything else? It just wants to, musical mode is really intended so that you could drop audio in and MIDI, with MIDI, you always had the capability, you could drop, play something at a very slow tempo, speed up the metronome, say if you had bad keyboard skills, you play it in at 60 beats a minute and then you play it back at 140 and then you're a genius. But that wasn't the same case for audio. If you did it with tape, it would change the pitch, but we wanted to have kind of the same experience for someone that was dealing with, that's coming from the flexibility of a MIDI background and a MIDI workflow to make the audio kind of fit much like MIDI does. So that's really kind of the intention, is just to make it easier. In previous generations, and I've been there, you're taking individually time stretching files, waiting an hour for a time stretch in the early days and being happy it just didn't sound awful, but now you can just take a whole project and just kind of, fix it in a matter of seconds and change the tempo and try out different ideas. So, but you could preserve the pitch, you could not preserve the pitch. It's really depending on your settings. Okay. So you see a question from Pablo. Greg, have you been able to try Cubase 11? If I was and had it and was involved and had seen it, I wouldn't be able to talk about it until release day. So, all right. So I know we had some people that had sent some questions in advance. So we got quite a few. So let's go ahead and I'll start going through those. I want to thank everyone for great questions. Okay. So let's see. I recorded some people talking with my phone. I've converted the recording to WAV. Now I want to include the WAV file in my project as a background sounds contentum or maybe continuum. I thought the best way to do this was put it on a sampler track, but I can't make that work. The sound and speed of the track changes, and it keeps going back and forth. How do I put the recording into the project and make it sound the way I recorded it? I have a chord track with chord pads in the project. So I don't think you have to actually do that. If you put it, I would put it into the sampler track to manipulate it and maybe perform it and play it. But I would just take, the particular audio file. So let's say if I just wanted like a background ambience, I would, let's see if I have my sound effects. So let's say I just have some sound effects. I could, so let me just, so let's say I wanted this audio file. I would just drag it in, let's say it's a recording from a phone or whatever it is, just, drag it in, go to the fader, and, this way it's not going to change pitch. It's just going to be kind of in the project. So instead of taking it to a sampler track, just drag and drop the file right into your timeline. Then it's not going to be changing. Okay, so we had a question. I created a chord, the chord pad section, example in E minor, with the bass E and C1 octave, then move it up to a chord track. It changes bass to E and C2, and how can it be kept what it was made? I have the chords I create in a chord pad section. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so let me just add. Okay, so let's say I just play. All right, so I'm just going to get the chord correct here. All right, so say now I want to take this and I'm just going to make a chord. So from my chord track, we'll create chord symbols. All right, so I have my E minor chord. I'll go to my chord pads. All right, so when you drag it to the chord pads, you know, one of the things you realize that it's going to be just kind of not necessarily the exact chord that you played, but it's the chord, and that could be not only just come over here and you could say, do different voicings of that chord. But I think if we wanted to take this, we could just choose kind of the, so I'm going to select this and let's just choose, you know, so if you play back, that's just kind of like a root chord. So let's see if I, let's see if there's some options here, but I think we could maybe, so I don't think it's going to copy over the same, you know, the intention is not really to copy over the same voicings, but if you have the chord track here, you could do basic chords, but I don't think that's going to convey over to, and just, you know, because this is just a chord, but not the exact chord voicing that you've started with. Okay, so we had a question from Greg McCarty. Says, hi, Greg. When using Voxengo's CurveEQ for mixing down, where do you recommend I put it? On the master bus, then where? The last slot? Or would I do a mix export, copying the stereo mix in the project, then use the CurveEQ that track after bypassing all sends and inserts? Always thanks. So if I was doing it for a particular project, so a lot of times what you'd want to do when using kind of the CurveEQ is just to make sure, let me just, so say if I'm in this project, so let me just revert this quickly. So I would probably put it in one of the last slots of your mix on the master fader. And why I would do this is, you know, so the Voxengo CurveEQ, if you're not familiar with it, allows you to kind of just learn, you know, particular EQ frequencies. So what this is going to allow you to do is you can put this into like an average mode and take, you know, the sound. So probably you're going to have maybe a reference track, I would assume. So I would have that reference track, and all this is going to go directly into the master fader. So send your reference track. You do just a quick take on the curve. So it's going to do kind of like an EQ fingerprint. Mute your reference track. Have it do another take of your mix. And then you can say, I want it, you know, the first one to be the reference that's applied to your mix. And then when you go to export, you obviously want to have your reference track muted. And at that point, you could just come over here. And when you do your export, that way it could automatically carry and include, once you do your final export audio mix down, that would include the EQ changes that you wanted from that. Okay, it says, hi Greg, I have switched to a MacBook Pro, all fresh installs and latest versions of plugins in Nuendo 10. I can't seem to see any presets for some of my plugin manufacturers where some load without a problem. I can't see Fab Filter, Tonstrom, Guilt Machines, and a few others, whereas I can see them from Plugin Alliance. Can you help, please? I think, each plugin could have its own preset mechanism, different ideas for, that are independent of the host. So if you see it on some, I don't run any of the plugins that you mentioned. So, but it could be that maybe it's just those plugin presets are, found somewhere else, because a lot of times they may not just show up in the typical VST. Let's see if I have just an effects plugin here. So let's say if I go to but not all plugins will kind of do the same. To see if I could find one that I had one third party. But, so each plugin may have its own architecture for presets. So it could be that it kind of overrides the design so it's consistent within their model of plugin presets. Okay, so we have a question. I've recently transitioned from Pro Tools to Nuendo 10, and I'm just getting to grips with a few things. I tend to export multiple versions of commercials and promos for TV. Can I bounce multiple mixes by cycle markers to a print track and with the events lining up with corresponding markers? As a bonus, is there a method and key command to rename the description and a file name simultaneously for said events after... Sorry, just had an email pop in, blocking my view. To rename the description and the file name simultaneously, or for said events, I bounce the mixes for a print track, or is there any way to double click a rename event? So if you wanted to rename the audio events, then we'll show you how to do the export here. All you have to do is, select the event, and you could just double click here in the file and just give it a new name. But let's say if I had a... let me just go to, let's say this was my live recording, and I will just revert this, and we'll set up some cycle markers for this. So let's say we're doing like, different movements here, and so let's say I wanted to put my different cycle markers. I'm going to add just a marker track, and let's add some cycle markers. Okay, I'll add another marker track. Okay, so I'm going to select this event. Well, I'll hit P, and I'll just insert cycle marker. And let's say I'm just going to set my cycle markers like so. Okay, so we have 4 cycle markers, and I could name these cycle markers. So let's call this, TV spot. And let's say we're doing a radio mix. And let's say web add, whatever. So I will just add one more cycle marker here. All right. And we'll say long form. Okay, so now I want to be able to make like mix down files of all these. So I'm going to go to my file menu to export, and we'll do audio mix down. I will choose to do a stereo out, and we'll choose to do the cycle markers here. And at this point, I can click on the naming scheme, and this works the same way in Nuendo. So, and we'll just say cycle marker name, and I'll drag that down and hit OK. Okay, so we will now just kind of come right over here. Let's export audio. So now it's going to take each of those cycle markers and export based on our project. So multiple projects that are all just separated or defined by the cycle markers. And I think let me check my settings, what I had in that folder again, sorry. Probably had that set incorrectly to open a new project. So let me just do my export audio mix down again. Okay, so I'm going to choose not to create a new project. So I'll just say create audio track. So again, we'll say our stereo out, markers, export audio. Hate when it's user error. So we can see that we have our TV spot, radio, so it's carried the name over from the cycle marker. It's created these onto individual audio files perfectly aligned with where the project was. So that's all you have to do for that. So once again, export audio mix down. Make sure that you have cycle markers. You could do stereo mix or stems if you wanted to. And click in the settings cogwheel for the file name and just choose to name by the cycle marker. So it's kind of a cool feature. Okay, so it says, I'm interested in whether you managed to find a way, so I'm interested. Okay, so it says there was a question in the last hangout about showing just the record enabled tracks. I'm interested in whether you managed to find a way to do that, but also a way just to show the tracks that have the monitor button switched on. If I have 100 tracks in multiple folders, many of which are closed, it is very time consuming to have to open them all and search through to see where I've left the monitor button on. So if we have a number of these tracks, let's say that are monitoring, and let's say, these are in different folders. So if I come here, at this point, we could just, so I have all these tracks and some of these are set to, let me just set an input channel here. So, and I wanted to, if there's like 100 tracks and I wanted to disable, so I don't know of a way to show you the tracks that are monitored enabled, but what I can do is through the project logical editor. I could say we want to do media type is equal to, or we'll just say container type is equal to track. And for the track operation, I could say we want to monitor disable. So now all my tracks that are set to monitoring, if I wanted to disable that, I could just hit apply, and that will do the disable. And I could also add another condition. We could say track operation record disable. So let's say if these are all monitored and record enabled, I could now just come over here. So we're going to say container type is equal to track operation monitored to disable, track operation record disable, and then you could just do that. So it won't necessarily find those particular tracks, but if your goal is to find those to disable it, you could do that with the project logical editor quite easily. All right, let me just make sure I didn't miss any of these questions. Okay, so let's go back to our live feed. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. All right. All right, let me just jump back into my feed here. And again, if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. Okay, so I just see a question. How can I access the Retrospective record? I just did 15 minutes of voiceover and apparently forgot to hit record. Is it possible that was recorded somewhere? Sorry, I didn't understand retrospective record. So if you're doing like retrospective record, so with MIDI, if I have a MIDI track here, we can think of retrospective record a lot of times is going to be for I had the most amazing idea of all time. I was just noodling. So what we can do now is just click here for MIDI stuff, and that will show up directly in our timeline. Now with audio, there is a pre-record buffer. So if we go to our preferences, and I think the maximum that you could do for this is 1 minute, because it's basically buffering it into your memory. So that could be tricky and take a lot of memory. So as we do this, we'll say record. So record audio. There's an audio pre-record seconds. So if you could probably get by default 1 second back. So that's probably not going to help you too much if you lost 15 minutes. So I'm sorry that if you lost 15 minutes of recording, and that's like the worst feeling in the world. So I hate to see people go through that. Okay. Just going through comments. Okay, just Okay, just reading through comments. So a lot of speculation on future stuff. Okay, just reading through comments. Just bear with me. Just a lot of great discussion going on. Okay, so to see Jazzu commenting, named by the cycle marker tip of the day. So that's a good one. An oldie but a goodie. Okay, so I see a question, how to split long MIDI note in editor to many same size MIDI notes. So let's say this is kind of the film composer 101 trick. So let's say I have a long note in my piece here. So one single note. And I'll just make this a little easier to see. All right, so when I come here and grab my scissors tool, my split tool, and hold down Alt or Option, we can now just have the same size note. So if I wanted to do this for quarter notes, let's say, so let's say if I just zoom in just a little further, so just Alt or Option, and then let's just say, just hold down Alt or Option with the scissors tool, and then you can cut into many pieces the same equal length. Okay, we see Michael Teams moving on. All right, so let's see. I may have actually gotten to the end of the questions. Let's see if there's any more questions. I think I got through the whole list today. I'll wait another minute and see if anyone else has any other last minute questions before we wrap up. Okay, so just see we need in a 3-minute pop song integrated platinum record option and project logical editor macro. So, okay, let's see if there's more questions coming in. If not, we could wrap up a couple minutes early. I'd like to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. I think Agent K's had to do some moderation today from what I saw. Thank you for that. I know other people are incredibly helpful. Jazz Dude's always great. All right, so we see Jim Philogene. I hope I'm not pronouncing your name wrong. So first time actually joining, so that's great. So the next one that we'll do is we've been doing these on Tuesday and Fridays. So start at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So I think in Central European time, that's 7 p.m. Okay, so I guess we met in Toronto at a Club Cubase session. Yeah, I haven't been to Toronto in a while, but I like doing those. Trying to remember the name of the store. But it was a really cool, huge store. Cosmo Music, maybe, something like that. Okay, so we just had a question. But how do I quantize audio easily? So we'll show you quickly. We touched on this a little earlier, but we'll do it again. Activate this project. So I will just kind of take acoustic guitar part here. So let's just go ahead and really all you have to do is go to your Quantize panel. You can say, okay, I want this to be like 16th notes. And here I'm just going to choose audio warp and then hit Quantize. And you can see the different events shift to be more in time. So you could do it just like that. Okay, so I see John Costigan is sent the link for restoring the logical editor presets. So thank you, John. Hope everything is settled down in Kenosha for you. Okay, so it looks like maybe we got through all the questions, but we'll end a couple minutes early. So I thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. If you have questions you want to submit in advance, send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And we'll be doing this again on Friday. All right, so see a quick questions come in. Have the minor scales and pitch correct been corrected? So let's take a look really quick. So I'll open up the pitch correct plugin. We're just right at the edge of time. So, yeah, I see that that's kind of where the A should probably be minor. So, but you could do a custom. If you wanted to as well, but I'll mention it on. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. We'll see everyone on Friday. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. If you learned something, hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, make sure you do that. And we'll see everyone on Friday. And thanks again.